Well, today is part 6 of our series in Hebrews. If you have been in this church a while, you'll know that we have almost never got to part 6 of anything because I cannot keep my attention span for 6 straight weeks on one subject. So we've got now part 6 of Hebrews. Next week is part 7, and it will be the final part in this series. The reason we can do so much in the book of Hebrews is there is so much in the book of Hebrews. Honestly, I mean, my brother's church, they preached the book of Hebrews through a year. And they just picked apart verses and preached into it. And you could easily get a year's worth of Sundays out of Hebrews. There's that much in it, but I can't do that, okay? That's for other churches and other ministers. But me, 6 or 7 is about my capacity. But there is so much in this, and we have absolutely loved it. And I want to encourage you, if you've missed any of the sessions, and 2 of them were Easter, Good Friday and Easter Sunday, if you missed them, check them out. It's incredible what the book of Hebrews and what the writer had to say to us, really, and so relevant to us in 2023. The thing about Hebrews that you need to know, if maybe you are joining us and it is your first time or you haven't been with us the whole series long, the thing you need to know about the book of Hebrews is that there is a general theme. The big picture of the book is actually quite simple. Although there's a lot in it, it's actually quite a simple image. And it's this: run your race well. That's it. So the book of Hebrews, the writer is constantly encouraging believers, Christians, to keep running the race, to not turn around, to run with endurance, to keep your eyes on Jesus, to hold on to your faith. He's saying the whole time it's the same thing, just keep on going. And he's writing this letter because he knows back then, as well as right now, believers have a tendency to get tired. Believers have a tendency to get fatigued, their faith runs thin, their stamina runs out. They are thinking about the things that they left behind in their old life, and sometimes that looks more attractive than the difficulty we're facing right now. And so there's this tendency sometimes, or this temptation, to turn back and go to what we knew before. And so he's telling them, but he's very much telling us as well, hey, focus forward. Eyes on the prize, don't look back, keep on going, and run to finish, because it's only those who finish the race that get the prize. It's only those that finish, not those who start. Many people start the race, but only those that finish the race will actually get the reward, will get the prize. And Hebrews 12 verse 1 says, "Let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us." And God has set a race in front of you. You're not here randomly running on there's not even a track for you. You're just somewhere running around a green field. You've seen kids when you let them loose on a green field. They just go boss. They just go anywhere and everywhere, okay? And then they'll go off the field and into the furrows and into the mud. That's not the kind of race that God has set for us. He's actually got a race that's set out for us. He has plan for you. He has destiny for you. He has purpose for you. And so the encouragement in Hebrews, and what I've been trying to encourage as well, is yes, start the race, but keep on with the race, keep on running. And my message today is not just to keep on running, but keep running with faith. Keep running with faith. Hopefully that's going to become a little bit clearer. You've started your race, but now you need to run with faith. And you can't preach a book or a preaching series on the book of Hebrews without getting into chapter 11 of Hebrews. It would be wrong. It just wouldn't be right. Anyone who's been in church a while knows Hebrews 11 is the chapter of faith. Exactly. Just like we all know 1 Corinthians 13, chapter on love, okay? That's the one, if there's a wedding message, we're pulling from that chapter, okay? It's 1 Corinthians 13 is the chapter on love. Hebrews chapter 11 is the chapter on faith, and it speaks about men and women who had incredible faith. And we can be mistaken for thinking that they were incredible women with incredible faith or incredible men with incredible faith. It's actually ordinary people with incredible faith. And what I'm encouraging today is exactly that. We are just plebs, man. Let's be honest, okay? We're just ordinary oaks who are getting through life. None of us are super special. None of us are that incredible. We're ordinary people, common people, but We can have an uncommon faith. And hopefully today, this is going to become a little bit easier. I've heard a lot of sermons on faith in my time, really a lot. And I find most of them to be highly impractical. Just have faith. Well, what on earth does that mean? Just have faith. Just hold on to your faith. Okay. How do I do that? What does it look like? How do I apply that when I'm going through a really tough situation? How do I apply that when someone I love is sick and dying? How do I apply that to a parent who's battling or to a child who's suffering? I don't know what does this just have faith actually look like? What does it translate to? And sometimes I'm left after these sermons on faith going, I'm not sure what more I can do, should do, want to do. I'm not quite sure what to do with what I've just heard. And so what I'm hoping for is that today will be practical, that today you'd be able to walk out of here with a handle on faith, something you can grip onto in your heart, that you can hold onto through any and every time. Hopefully it'll be that practical. And in fact, Hebrews chapter 11, this chapter on faith, starts off almost assuming that you also think faith is a little bit airy-fairy. That you're like, it's like up there, faith, it's in the sky, we just believe and hope and things will happen. Well, so he starts off the chapter with these verses that ground faith, that make faith practical, that make faith concrete. Listen to Hebrews 11, verse 1 and 2. And if you've been in church a while, you'll know probably the New King James Version, which is not a version of the Bible I normally preach from, but you'll maybe recognize this. Now faith, speaking about faith, is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. The elders is not Richard and Raul and Jenny and those. It's not talking about the elders. It's talking about those who have run the race before you, okay? Those are the elders who they're about to list and speak into their lives a little bit. But the point that I'm trying to make is this first part. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The New Living Translation, which is one that I more frequently will read, and it says it like this: faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things we cannot see. And then it says, through their faith, the people in the days of old earned a good reputation. And so what I'm trying to show you is that faith is practical, it's concrete, it's real. It speaks about faith being substance. It speaks about faith being evidence, and that word substance really comes from a Greek word which means to fully support. It's the same word you would use for foundation of a house. That's what it's talking about when it's talking about substance. It's saying it's faith is like a firm, solid foundation. It can support weight. You can build your life on faith. That's how strong, real, and concrete it is. It's the substance of what we hope for. And it's not only the substance, it's also evidence. Have you watched enough court dramas in your life to know what evidence is all about? You're not going to convict anyone without evidence. What is evidence? It's the concrete facts, right? It's them finding the knife. It's them finding the drugs. It's the evidence that gets submitted. It's the concrete thing. We can't go on someone's, I don't know, I think maybe this thing happened. Well, that's not going to get anyone convicted. You need evidence. It's solid, strong, and concrete. And so that evidence, that word evidence, means a satisfying conviction. You've got a satisfying conviction inside of you that something is the truth. Even if you don't fully understand it, you've got that satisfying conviction that something is the truth. And God is calling us to live a life of faith. He really is. God is calling every single one of us to live a life of faith, or to run the race of faith, to trust Him and His way for our lives. And I get it. I don't think everyone thinks that's a valuable endeavor. I don't think everyone thinks, well, living a life of faith, that sounds like a fun thing. That's something I really want to do. There's many people who would think of people like you and me, people of faith. They would think of us as simple-minded. Ever had a family member who's thought that? Oh, shame, man. Shame they've got their faith. Just leave them. They seem happy. It's good enough for them, you know. They think of us as naive, a bit dwarf, don't really understand things, a lack of intellect happening over here. It's not that at all, though. It's not weak. It's not naive. It's not a lack of intellect. It's nothing like that. It's not simple-minded. But people can view it like that. Shame, man. Just let them get on with their faith. It seems to help. Faith isn't some up in the air, pie in the sky idea that doesn't mean anything here on earth. I would argue that your faith has a profound impact on the way that you think and a profound impact in the way that you live your life. Possibly the most profound impact of anything in your life that determines how you think and how you behave is your faith. It is that concrete. And so what I want to do in just trying to understand and explore what faith is I need to take a look at what faith isn't, because sometimes it's helpful to look at what something isn't, then you can rightly see what it is. And sometimes people get confused with what faith actually is. And it can look like these things, but it is not these things. And so if this is a way you've thought about it, I'm encouraging you to just put that out of your mind and not put it in the same boat as faith. Faith is not blind optimism. Faith is not blind optimism. You know, things are going to work out. I've got faith. What does that mean? What do you have faith in? What exactly is your faith in that things are going to work out? Is it just you have faith in what? What's the object of your faith? It's not blind optimism. Hey, everything is fine. And if you're a Christian, you can misquote Romans 8:28. Oh, God will work all things out. It's fine. It's a blind optimism. That's not what that verse is actually saying, that everything will work out the way that you hope, dream, and plan for. That's not what that verse is saying in any way. It's saying that even when things go pear-shaped, in the most awful ways, God is so big He can take those awful things and do something good with that. So it's totally different to, hey, I've got faith, everything's going to work out. Blind optimism is not faith. You know what else isn't faith? Positive confession. This is something that moves into the world through this kind of new age thinking. It's positive confession. Now, Christians, we know, because the Bible teaches us, and we know from experience, that your words have power. They have the power of life and death. No problem with that. We understand the power of our words. But faith is not positive confession. If I speak out positive things will happen. What are you talking about? What is your faith in? Is your faith in your words, in how positive they are, in how well you speak them, in your mental state when you say, what is your faith actually in? It doesn't make sense for faith to be confused with positive confession. Faith is also not a feeling. Faith is not a feeling. You know, I've just got a feeling that things are going to work out. Okay. Don't confuse that with faith. That's not faith at all. It's not a good way to measure faith when you tie it to your feelings. Why? Because feelings are unreliable, notoriously. Because feelings will go up and down, right? I don't know anyone who always feels up. I don't know anyone who always feels down, because feelings do this from day to day, moment to moment, hour to hour, week to week. And so if your faith is tied to your feelings, I'm telling you, you've got a problem. And then you're going to come to church and go, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. It's not feeling, God. It's not feeling spiritual. I read my Bible, I'm just not feeling it. Why? Because your faith is tied to your feelings. It's not about that. Would you do it even if the feelings aren't there? Choices lead, feelings follow. That's how men and women of faith live. Choices lead, feelings follow. It's not the other way around. The other way around is what the world does. Feelings lead, choices follow. No, it doesn't work like that. Choices lead, feelings come afterwards. Faith is not a feeling. Faith is only as good as its object. It's only as good as what you've got faith in. I don't have faith in my positive words or in my anything like that. Faith is only as good as its object. So what is your faith in? As you sit here today, as you listen, what is your faith in? And I want to propose that there's only one thing that's worth having your faith in, and that is God. That's God. It's who He is. It's what He's done. It's His promises. And when you read through Hebrews chapter 11, the chapter on faith, you won't see faith as blind optimism. You're not going to see any of these heroes of the faith going, I just hope that this ark thing works out. I don't know. I've got a feeling I'm going to get pregnant. You're not going to see blind optimism. You're not going to see positive confession. You're not going to see feelings of faith in this chapter 11 over here. If there was a theme or a title for chapter 11, it would be this: common people with an uncommon faith. That's what it would be, because it's normal oaks like you and me. It's normal individuals. And all of us have got a level of common faith. And you know this. You've experienced this. You are literally practicing faith right now. Because when you came into this building and you had to choose where to sit, and you had to decide in a millisecond, will this chair support my weight? You had to do it. Didn't you? We all have to. And you go, well, because it's done it before, because I've sat in a chair just like this one and it has, I know that I can confidently and comfortably say, this chair will take my weight. And you sit in it. And you know what? That's become like second nature to you. You don't even think about it anymore. That's just common faith, but it is actually faith. It's trusting in something you can't see and you're not 100% sure will do what it needs to do, but it does it. It's just common faith. It's the same thing when you open your taps at home. Isn't it true when you turn on the faucet or you, whatever, that's so American. Ugh. I mean, I love Americans. When you turn on the tap, man, what do you think's going to happen? Okay, in best case scenario, best case, okay. So if you're living in America, no, I'm just joking. So in a best case scenario, you turn on the tap and you just got faith that water's going to come out of it. That it's not going to be some sludge, some slime, some poison, some difficult, it's going to be water. You're going to open the tap and there it is. And that's just like a common faith. That's just like, hey, I open this and this happens. I'm not 100% sure why or how or when, but it happens. It's the same reason you take pills that the doctor gives you. That's common faith. Not many people in this room would know what constitutes a pill, what medicine is in there, and what exactly is it doing to your body. But you know, when I've got a headache, I'm going to go and I'm going to go into the cupboard, I'm going to take a Panado or whatever it is, or a Disprin, I'm going to take it with water, and hey, check this out. Suddenly the headache goes away. Well, how many of you know what was in that pill? Who knows? And so you take it in faith. Right? Because the doctor said, hey, if you've got a headache, take this pill, it's going to work. And maybe there's other medication. But we don't know exactly. But we've got this common level of common faith. But Hebrews 11 is about more than that kind of common faith. It's common people, yes. People who had bills to pay and difficult kids and struggled thinking about the future. Common people, but they had this uncommon faith. They had this faith in God through really like sometimes difficult times and sometimes really long periods of time where they had to hang on to God, where they had to trust Him. He had said something and it didn't make sense. It didn't look like it was going to pan out that way. Everything seemed to be completely opposite, in fact, to what they thought was going to happen. And yet they held on to their faith in God. So it's common people with this uncommon faith. They held on, they trusted. Think of some of those people that it mentions here. Noah. I mean, here's Noah. I think there's a movie out again. There's always movies about Noah. But you've got Noah, never rained before. No one had a boat before. It wasn't a status symbol back then. There just wasn't boats. And God says, build this massive one. Well, okay. I don't know what the point would be, but I'll do it. And he builds it, and it's not like a month or 2 months. I mean, it's years and years and years. And in the meantime, people are mocking him. You're such an idiot. What are you doing? Water's never fallen from the sky. What are you going to do with this massive boat? Why does it need to be so big? Why does it need, like, come on. And they tease him and they mock him, and he just holds on. And he keeps his faith. And he builds it, and we know how that story ends. Him and his family are saved in the end. Think about Abraham. Someone that the Bible often refers to as the father of the faith. Think about Abraham. He was called to uproot his family. And so think of yourself living in a comfortable situation, and then you just know God is saying you need to up and go. Where? No, I'm not going to tell you, but don't worry, you'll know when you get there. Well, that's not helpful. That's a little bit tricky. But that's what God does. And so he uproots his family. He's trusting what he can't see, and he's uprooting the stuff that he can see. And he's moving it, and he moves his home, he uproots, he goes, he lives in a tent, he lives as a foreigner in a foreign land. He doesn't even know where he's going. Common person, uncommon faith. He held on to God for a long time. Think about Sarah. She's also mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11, Sarah, desperate to fall pregnant. But there were two major things that were not going well for her. One was that she was barren. She could not have children. And number two was that she was ancient. She was absolutely ancient. She was so old, there was just no possible way that she could have children. And yet, God had said that you will have children, and they'll be numerous. And she held on. And I kind of like Sarah because she messed up a little. And I think Abraham didn't mind, if I'm being honest. She messed up because somewhere along the line, after the years of waiting, after not seeing the promise, after not being fulfilled, she says, you know what, maybe it's not me, maybe it's my servant girl. Maybe that's the way God wanted to make this whole thing work is, okay, Abraham, servant girl. And that wasn't actually what God had planned. That wasn't his plan. So of course, she waits longer and she does give birth, but she waited and she waited. And I kind of like that she shows the humanness and the flaws of us as people. We get tired, we want to make a plan for God, help him to solve the problem. Think about Moses. Something we don't often get about Moses is that he had the wealth and the power of Egypt basically in his hands. It wasn't just a case of, oh, I'm going to go and rescue God's people, like some kind of hero complex. It wasn't anything like that at all. He had the wealth of Egypt in his hands, and instead he turned his back on that, joined the oppression of God's people. And then in the end, again, we know the story. He left the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to a great reward, to a better reward. Think about Rahab. Some of you know who Rahab was. She was a prostitute. She was someone who was not even part of God's people. She wasn't part of the people that came out of Egypt and were rescued. She wasn't a Hebrew or part of the Israelite nation. She wasn't anything like that. But she joined sides with God's people. And she became an ancestor of Jesus. It's wonderful. She held on. She was a common person. They were common people. But they had this uncommon faith that if we hang on to God, if we hang on to our faith in God, we will make it to the right place where God wants us. Are you getting the point of this? I'm trying to, more than anything, give you something to handle, something to hold on to, because there is no chance that we are not going to go through difficult things. And sometimes we are going to need a handle to get through these things. Maybe you've had to up and leave, or maybe you've had to leave family, or maybe you've had to, you've struggled with different things. We can relate to a lot of what happens in Hebrews chapter 11. They lived through difficult times, but they held tightly to their faith in God. It was literally the firm foundation. It was what they built their lives on. They all of these people staked their entire future on their faith in God. And what you would have noticed from all of these things is it was in what they did. I think that it's become too easy to be like people of faith because of our words. Have you ever sung a worship song on complete autopilot? I've done that. My mind is not even here. I'm thinking about the message. I'm thinking about afterwards. I'm thinking about something I need to do. And then I realize, oh, the song ended. But I was singing along. But my mind and my heart were not even there. They were completely on autopilot. And sometimes it's so easy to have faith with our words. Well, these Hebrews 11 people, it wasn't faith with their words. It was faith with their actions. No, they built an ark. That is intense. They lived in tents. They left their home. They lived as foreigners. They all did. And that was a demonstration of their faith. It was what they did, not what they confessed or their blind optimism or their feelings, nothing like that. It was tough. But here's the point. The only way to have tough faith is to go through tough times. So some of us want to have tough faith that can survive, that can last, that can get through the difficult times. We just don't want to go through anything difficult to get there. And what I'm trying to tell you, and what the writer of Hebrews is trying to say, it doesn't work like that. Because faith is like a muscle. It needs to be exercised, and it gets exercised in difficult times. That's just the way that it works. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I could have all the muscles I wanted without a stitch in the gym. I wish I could have a strong faith muscle that could get me through any difficult time without any struggles. It just doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. The only way to have tough faith is to go through tough times. And so many times God allows us through difficulties because He's strengthening our faith. Now, that's not a very encouraging thing to tell someone who's going through difficulties, but it is the truth and it is the reality. He's strengthening your faith. And in fact, in a bigger picture, He's strengthening the faith of His church. And it's possible that even now you can be going through some stuff and you feel like, I'm not sure my faith can make this. I'm not sure that my faith can handle this. I feel like my faith is, if it's a muscle, it is a pretty small muscle. I feel like it's the thinnest bridge I could walk over. There's like nothing left. It's as thin as a hair. And you could be going through something and feeling that way. But here's what I want to say to you. You need to make it. You need to make it. You need to hold on. You need to keep running. There is a race for you to finish. And right now, think of it like this. You are in the spiritual gym working your faith muscle. If you are going through a difficult time now, see it like that. Because that's exactly what's happening. You are building your faith. You're going to the gym. You're exercising your faith muscle. Jeremiah, one of the prophets in the Old Testament, had that same feeling of like, I need to quit now. Like, this is too hard. This is too difficult. It's been too long. I haven't seen the rewards. I haven't seen the promises. I want to give up. And God spoke to him and listened to God's encouragement. He said in Jeremiah 12:5, if racing against mere men makes you tired, how will you race against horses? If you stumble and fall on open ground, what will you do in the thickets near the Jordan? Oh, I thought God was going to be encouraging here. I thought He was going to say, it's okay, take a rest. I'm going to help you. Here's some refreshment. No, instead He's saying, hey, I know that it's tough, but I'm preparing you for what's even tougher. And if you can't handle this, you are never going to handle that. You are not going to be able to finish the race if right now you're already fatigued. I can say this because none of my kids are in here. But when we go walking, it isn't 20 meters before they're like, oh, my back, my legs, my feet. Am I right? I'm like, how are you going to do park run? It's 5 kilometers. And here you step out of the car and you're exhausted. Like, how does this work, you know? But sometimes that's how we are in our lives. And it's like, oh, Lord, I'm struggling. And I'm not trying to make anyone's struggles seem less or light. I'm not trying to do that. But sometimes we can be like, yo, Lord, I've trusted you for a whole week. What? Try 40 years. Try 50 years of building an ark. Try 60 years of waiting for a son to be born. And we're like, yo, Lord, but it's been like 7 days and I've really held on to you. Well, how are you going to survive that if you can't survive this? God isn't looking for a weak and pathetic church. Can I just be completely honest? He's not looking for a church that's like, sure, I just stepped out the door and my ankle's a bit sore. He's looking for a strong church. He's looking for a church that has strong faith, that keeps running, that can run with horses, if I can use that terminology. God is preparing us, all of us. Because if we're being honest, we'll realize that the world isn't getting easier to have faith in. It's not. It's getting much harder to have strong faith in. The world isn't getting easier. So God knows we need to have tough faith if we're going to make it to the end of this race. There's a spiritual reality around us that we don't often see. Many of us haven't seen it. But there's a spiritual reality which I feel is almost more real than the real reality, than the stuff that we can see and touch. And we don't often get glimpses into it, but all around us, God is working, His angels are moving, things are happening, God is orchestrating circumstances and all sorts of things in the background. You can't see it because all we can see is people, right? We can only see stuff. But I'm suggesting that the spiritual realm is far more real and far more significant than the things that you and I can see and taste and touch. And every now and again in the Bible, it's like God opens the eyes of some people, some ordinary people. He opens their eyes to be able to see, you're not alone. You think that's your circumstance. Let me show you what it really looks like. And He almost takes the blinders off. And now you can see, whoa, this is what the spiritual world looks like. You think of a couple of examples that come to mind. Genesis, there's Jacob, and Jacob has just stolen his brother Esau's birthright. Now, that doesn't mean much to us in 2023, but the bottom line is it was a horrible thing to do. And he steals this birthright and he runs because his butt is mad. He wants to kill him, literally kill him. And so he runs, he flees, and he's tired, he's exhausted. He stops at Bethel, he puts his head on a rock and he just passes out. I mean, he's so tired. And during the night he has this dream or this vision, and he sees like this stairway to heaven. You can't say that without thinking Led Zeppelin. It's just not possible. But he sees that, and God's there, and God blesses him, and it's this incredible moment. And then he wakes up, and he says this, and don't worry, the verse won't come up. He says, when Jacob woke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. It's almost as though like God for a moment took his, here. Let me show you. I know you feel lost, you feel alone, you feel hunted, you feel guilty, you feel like nothing, you feel like you've done wrong, and you have done wrong. But it's like God just opens his eyes to the spiritual reality and he sees, whoa, God is in this place. Didn't even realize it. It's like he could see into the spiritual realm. It's an incredible thing that he did then. And he had this option whether he must choose what he can see with his eyes or what he can see with his faith. And of course we know this ended well for him. He chose to see not with his human eyes. There's another story, and it's a great story. If you're going to read something this week, this would be a good thing. It comes from 2 Kings chapter 6, and it's a story of Elijah, who's one of the prophets of God at the time, and there's a Syrian army that wants to destroy the people of God. There's always someone wanting to destroy the people of God. And the Syrians, they're the ones who are at it this time, and you've got Elijah, and Elijah keeps hearing from God. So the Syrians, they plan this attack, this strategy. They're going to come around this way, and they're going to surprise them, and they're going to kill them. And then God speaks to Elijah. Elijah speaks to the king, and he says, hey, they're going to come around you. They're going to kill you, so just be aware of it. Go around this way. Okay, and then they do it, and they're saved, and everything's amazing. And this keeps on happening, and Elijah's like messing up the Syrian king's plans time after time after time until the Syrian king says, hey, something is wrong here. There's a spy in the Syrian. Someone is telling them our plans. And they say, no, it's actually not that. We didn't want to tell you, but there's this oak, Elijah. And there God keeps talking to him. And then it's insane. It's like he knows what gets said in your bedroom. He says, well, then we need to kill him, which is a good plan. That makes a lot of sense. So they get this massive army around. They figure out that he's in this town, and they get this army to surround the town. And they wake up in the morning, fresh as daisies, on a crispy morning. See how I did that? And then they come out, and the servant of Elijah looks, and all he can see is imagine, I don't know what movie, Braveheart or some other dodgy one. And you've got just chariots and people, and it's like they're waiting to attack you. They'll wipe you out. They'll kill this whole town just to get to you. It's not even a problem. And Elijah's totally relaxed. And he prays this. This is what he says in 2 Kings 6, verse 17. He says, Elijah prayed. Sorry, my thing flew away. It says this. Then Elisha, sorry, my mistake. No, it's Elisha, my bad, his successor. Then Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes and let him see. The Lord opened the young man's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. That is an incredible story, because the odds are stacked against you. They are out to get you. There is defeat coming here, whether you like it or not. And then God opens his eyes, and he just sees angels that are fighting for them. And it's like that moment of, and this guy's trusting in what he can see, but Elisha's trusting in the King of Kings. He's trusting in God and in what happens even behind the scenes. It's amazing. Think about the 3 trees in the fire. They had to trust, right? They had to bow down to the statue or choose death. And they said, well, we'll choose that. We're going to rather obey the king we can't see than the king we can see. And they realized that the spiritual and the physical are really, really close together. But if I have to choose one to put my faith and my trust in, it's going to be the spiritual. And they held on tightly to a God who is bigger and more powerful than anything else. And that's kind of what I want for sure for me, but it's what I want for you as well. Because there's a couple of benefits, and I'm going to end with this today. There's a couple of benefits from choosing faith over fear, from choosing to trust in what you can't see sometimes rather than what you can see. And number one, and this comes from the verse we've already read, your faith is a good witness. People are looking up to you. You may not know it, you may not see it, you may not feel it, no one might tell you, hey, I'm looking up to you, but your kids are looking up to you, your siblings are looking up to you, your colleagues are looking up to you. They're all looking to you. People are following you. People are watching you. And some people know what you're going through and they're just waiting to see how you go through it. Will they abandon their faith or will they hold on? Will they keep doing the whole Christian thing even though God has allowed this or allowed that, or are they going to give in now? They're watching. In Hebrews 11, verse 1 and 2, that the last part of that verse there, you'll see, says, through their faith, speaking about that list of faith, through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. They were a good witness to those around them. And how awesome is this? That's at the beginning of the chapter. Right at the end of the chapter, it says almost the same thing, and it's speaking about the list. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. All these people earned a good reputation. People were watching them, and they didn't let go. They ran their race holding the faith the whole way to the finish line. I'm going to come back to that verse in a second, Kanyisa. Then, number 2. So that's the first thing. Your faith is a good witness. Hold on to it. Number 2, your faith pleases God. Faith pleases God. And the Bible's very clear. In fact, it says explicitly, without faith, it's impossible to please God. And I don't know if you know this, but it is literally the highest goal of every single human being, every single Christian, every believer, every person who's lived, whether they know Christ or not. The highest goal for all of us is the same. It's to be pleasing to God. It's to honor Him. And that looks like various things, but that's the bottom line of it. That is the meaning of our lives, to live your life to please or bring glory to God. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 9 says, our goal is to please Him. Jesus said, everything I do pleases the Father, including going to the cross. Everything I do pleases the Father. Hebrews 11 verse 5 says, Enoch was known as a person who pleased God. And it speaks about his faith. It's his faith that pleased God. When you live a life of faith, you get God's stamp of approval. And I think that's worth having. Not everyone else is going to give you their stamp of approval. There'll be other people who don't understand or care or like your life of faith, but you'll have God's approval. And you need to ask yourself, is that enough for you? Is that enough for you? The Hebrews 11 list, it was enough for them to have God's approval, even though the people around them didn't understand, didn't like it. But they had God's approval. I'm going to ask that you would stand to your feet, and I'm going to end with that verse. I don't know if is the whole team here, the worship team. Can I ask you guys can come up as well if you are here. What I've been trying to do today, more than anything else, is give you that handle for your faith. Because like I said, I've heard a lot of faith messages. They're not super, super practical. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want you to think of faith as some airy-fairy thing that's out of touch with reality or what you're going through. And so this is how I'm going to end today. There's a verse, and I didn't read the end of it now. Kanyisa, if you can put that on. It's Hebrews 11:39. Thank you. And it says, all of these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. That's good. It was a witness. But listen to this last part. Yet none of them received all that God had promised. That's interesting. Because in a way, you feel like they did. The ark was there. My life was saved. I moved. I took the people out of Egypt. Moses, he did his thing, and they were rescued. And didn't they see the fulfillment of the promise? Didn't Sarah see the child that was born? Because it kind of looks like it did, but there's something else that you may not realize if you don't understand that the Bible is one long story, and the story leads to Jesus. That's how it works. The entire Old Testament weaves its way towards Jesus, and everyone who's listed in that hall of faith, Hebrews chapter 11, every single one of them were leading to Jesus. Rahab, Moses, Abraham, Sarah, every single one of them was leading to something that they actually couldn't see because Jesus hadn't come yet. And so everything that they were doing, all their faith in God was, yes, it was for the thing I'm going through right now, but it was much bigger than that. There's something that hasn't even been seen yet. There's redemption for all people. There's relationship restored with God. I don't see it yet, but I know that it's coming. Now, we're on the right side of history in the sense that it has happened. We don't have to go, I need to have faith because, there's a Messiah coming. No, he's come. We're on the right side of this thing. It's actually awesome. We get to live on the other side of Jesus' death and his resurrection. So here's my point. If you say, what's the handle? What's the handle I can hold on to? So I'm going through something, right? I'm not saying me personally. I'm saying you might think this. You might be going through something. And it might be someone who's struggling with sickness. It might be someone close to you who's passed away. It could be whatever it is. It could be financial, it could be relational, it could be health. Whatever it is that you're battling with now, what is the faith handle that you can hold on to? Regardless of what you're going through, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. Jesus came as a human being to earth. Fully human, fully God. He came and he lived a life that we could never live. And he died a death that we all should have died. And when he died, we spoke about this on Easter, he was the last and ultimate sacrifice. He paid for every single one of our sins, completely and in full. But that wasn't all, because on the third day he rose again. So he didn't only conquer sin, he conquered death, which means that when we die, we don't now stay dead. We don't just die and we're dead and that's it, that's our life done. But we can go to eternal life in the presence of God. So you say, well, how does that help me? That is the only thing that's going to help you. Because it doesn't actually matter what you're facing here on earth. Might be devastating, might be difficult, it might be faith testing and faith trying. But Jesus died for you. He died for your sins. He rose from the dead so that you could have new life with Christ. Right? Irrespective of what you're going through. Yeah, but this thing's happened in my life. It doesn't change the fact that Jesus died. Yeah, but I'm not feeling it. It doesn't change the fact that Jesus died for you. That is the handle. That is the solid, firm foundation. The Bible calls it an anchor in the storm. And I just love that metaphor. It is an anchor in the storm. Keeps us grounded, keeps us solid.